The High Court in Dominica has denied a request from the opposition for an injunction to stop Friday's general election from taking place. Judge Bernie Stevenson ruled that since the president of Dominica, Charles Savarin, had already issued a writ to hold the elections, the High Court could not intervene. The petition was filed by the Concerned Citizens Movement, the CCM, which reflects the views of the UWP opposition party. Lawyers for the CCM have already said they will appeal the decision. This could mean the case ends up going to the Caribbean Court of Justice in Trinidad and Tobago. And despite that court ruling, the leader of the opposition UWP, Lennox Linton, is threatening to resort to violence to prevent the vote. Our correspondent Alejandro Kirk reports from the capital, Rousseau.
It is not a building, but a cruise ship, taller than any in Dominica. Its engines move the local economy, but political upheavals have broken the soft Caribbean harmony. The High Court of Justice has rejected an injunction to stop the upcoming elections.
So the court said no, the election will continue. Because under our law, and it's not only the law of Dominica, but the law of the Commonwealth, that says that once the president, as the head of state, issues the writ or the proclamation for the elections, then the elections must proceed. And if one wants to challenge it, then one has to challenge it, a person has to challenge it by a petition after the holding of the elections.
Supported by the leadership of the United States and the Organization of American States, the opposition denounces Dominica's Labourite government for electoral fraud, among many other accusations.
The accusations that Mr. Linton has been making, he has not provided a single shred of evidence of those accusations. In fact, the Prime Minister has sued him in the court in Dominica for those accusations. And the Minister for Foreign Affairs has also sued him in the courts.
Facing another legal defeat, opposition leader Lennox Linton foresees violence.
Ask those who want me to hypocritically tell people, okay, behave yourself, cool down, calm down. When their rights are being abridged, when their rights are being abused, where they are being trampled on by people who are no better than a bunch of hungry hyenas.
Labour Prime Minister, ranking ahead on polls, rejected an electoral freeze and decided to ease tensions.
This country is safe, and free and fair elections will go ahead on December 6 as scheduled. I repeat my call to Lennox Linton, Edison James and the UWP to bring an end to this lawlessness. I am calling on them to tell their supporters to stop. I am calling on Linton and the UWP to put Dominica first.
Sailing away, visitors don't have a clue of what's happening. But Dominica is fighting a struggle so much on social rights as for independence and sovereignty. Jesus Romero and Alejandro Kirk, Telesur, Rosso.
In Colombia, a third national strike has commenced against the neoliberal policies of President Iván Duque's government. Protesters are also demanding an end to the killing of environmental leaders, social activists, and former FARC members. Students, workers' unions, indigenous communities, and health workers are taken to the main cities across Colombia after the main strike committee refused to continue talks with the government. The member nations of the Inter-American Treaty of Reciprocal Assistance have begun meeting in Colombia to discuss new interventionist actions against Venezuela. During the meeting, the foreign ministers of the TR nations agreed to continue their attacks on the Bolivarian nation. Among the measures are continued persecution against Venezuelan government officials and further economic sanctions, which are promoted by the Organization of American States. The Bolivarian Alliance for the Peoples of Our America, or ALBA, says it is concerned about attempts to interfere in the domestic affairs of Suriname. Venezuela's Foreign Minister Jorge Arreaza tweeted a communique in which ALBA condemns the manipulation of a legal process that is still in course to try to block President Desi Bouterse from standing for re-election next year. Last Friday, a court convicted the president of murder, but he said that the charges were a political game and is appealing. Alba criticized the governments of Germany, the Netherlands, the United States and others for interfering in a matter which is the exclusive concern of the people and authorities of Suriname. Antigua and Barbuda's Prime Minister plans to take legal action against Dr. Arnold McIntyre, a deputy chief in the IMF's Western Hemisphere office. This after McIntyre allegedly made defamatory comments about political leaders, calling them corrupt.
I said, so what led you to make to come to this conclusion, to make this statement on WhatsApp to some individual that I am corrupt? Where is the evidence that I have been involved in any corruption? Where is the evidence that I have abused the Antigua CIP program?
What was his response?
Boy, I so ashamed to answer, right? The man danced around the bush. He said, well, you know, I could not have made a statement in WhatsApp, you know, Prime Minister. I could not have made such a statement. So I saying to myself, okay, he didn't make it a WhatsApp. Well, whatever forum or whatever medium that he utilized, the reality is his voice. And I writing to the IMF to ask him to fire him. It is actually the type of offense that could result in his termination. I think it is reprehensible. And if you hear what he says about some of the prime ministers in this region, it is reprehensible. You know, and for one, I'm not going to sit back and take it. I'm going after him, and he have to prove that it's not him on that tape. And by the way, I'm likely to get my lawyer to write him as well.
In other news, thousands of patients in the city of El Alto in Bolivia were left without access to health care after a Cuban doctor's mission was expelled from the country. Let's take a look.
Benita is 61 years old. She's been selling food for 36 years in El Alto. And from her stall, she saw how the public hospital was built, where over 20 Cuban doctors looked after people every day.
When they first came here, they worked as construction workers. They built the place themselves.
Hundreds of patients were given free access to healthcare, even coming from Peru. But hours after the coup against President Evo Morales, the de facto president Janine Áñez ejected the Cuban mission and left the people of El Alto without their clinic.
We came here to see the doctors, with any illness we may have. We no longer have access to specialized medicine because it's expensive and people in El Alto do not have the resources.
The community hospital, Chacaltaya, is located in El Alto. Here, hundreds of healthcare professionals learned their skills thanks to a cooperation agreement between Bolivia and Cuba. This also involved the Milagro mission, under which thousands of citizens recovered their vision free of charge.
They were good doctors. There were many patients here. People without any money could get medical treatment. How could they say they were terrorists? I miss the doctors. Now patients come, but they get nothing.
Since the Cuban delegation left, this hospital is empty, and the workers that are left have been given orders to remain quiet. There's one general physician and 3 dentists who remain here. Bettina recalls when she would get checked here and was also given free medicine.
Anytime I came here with any ailment, they would always treat me and give me medicine. There used to be long lines here.
Since the first cooperation agreement was made between Cuba and Bolivia, thousands of doctors have provided medical care to the citizens here, with over 73 million appointments and more than 1.5 million surgeries. In this way, the legacy of the Cuban doctors will not be easily forgotten.
Negotiations are continuing in Bolivia's Legislative Assembly to decide the candidates for the Supreme Electoral Court, which will organize new elections. Our correspondent, Mateo Grille, has the details from La Paz.
So far, there are 4 candidates to sit on the Supreme Electoral Court of Bolivia, which must set the date for the next election in this country. This was an agreement reached in the Plurinational Assembly. and it establishes a series of requirements for finally constituting the main electoral authority to organize the next elections. In all, there are 7 members of the Supreme Electoral Court. One of them has already been appointed by the de facto president of the country, Yanín Áñez. So there are 6 members still to be elected from all the candidates. 3 of these must be women, and 2 must belong to the indigenous or peasant peoples. Next December 18 is the deadline to elect the candidates, and applications will be accepted up until the 7th of this month. Between December 7th and 18th, the candidates who apply will be scrutinized, and personal interviews will be conducted to decide on the members of this court. After the court is elected, it will have 120 days to hold the date of the next elections. There is not yet a date for the elections, but they will set that date after December 18th. The elections will be for the president, vice president, members of the lower house and senators. Remember that at the moment there is a de facto regime in Bolivia after Yanín Áñez proclaimed herself president of Bolivia after the constitutional president of the country, Evo Morales, was pressured by the armed forces to resign from the presidency, and as you know, later he had to accept the offer of asylum in Mexico made by the President Andrés Manuel López Obrador.
That was Mateo Grille from Bolivia. And we have more stories coming up, so don't go away. Welcome back. There is outrage in Brazil as it emerged that 9 people who died at a street party over the weekend may have been killed by the police. The authorities initially said that the deaths resulted from a stampede in the favela of Paraisópolis in Sao Paulo. Our correspondent Brian Meir has the details.
This is a large favela in the south side of Sao Paulo, bordering on the very rich neighborhood of Morumbi, and it has this kind of iconic funk party that goes on the street with thousands of people every Saturday night, which has been featured in telenovelas, on a Netflix series called Sintonia, and it's well known all around Brazil. Now, last Saturday night, the police came in, and by the time they had left the area, there were 9 dead young men. The first story they gave was that 2 people on motorcycles had shot at them, and they chased them into the area, and the crowd panicked, and as everyone ran away, some people got trampled to death. However, since Saturday night, since Sunday morning when the news broke, videos have started circulating on the social media. There's video circulating that shows police shooting at dancers and participants in the party with rubber bullets, beating them with clubs for no reason as they're trying to walk out of the area. And there's video surfacing of the police ordering ambulances to stay out of the area. Meanwhile, the governor, João Doria, who's responsible for the military police in São Paulo, says he's not going to change anything in his security plan. And it's ironic because his plan was released a few days before this massacre. And in the plan, there's no provision for lowering the rate of police violence in the state. So a lot of human rights activists are saying maybe the police just read the plan or heard about the plan and interpreted it as a green light that they could just go out and kill people at will.
Brian Meir from Brazil. Venezuela is represented at the COP25 Climate Summit by the Minister of Communications, Jorge Rodriguez. He drew a sharp contrast between the approach to climate change of indigenous peoples in the South and that of the major powers.
Incluyamos a los movimientos sociales.
We invite the social and environmental movements here and representatives of our indigenous peoples, but the irony of the global capitalist system is that they are the main victims of a phenomenon for which they are not responsible, while the big powers, who are the main culprits for greenhouse gas emissions, show a total lack of vision and cannot see what is happening and even deny it in the most grotesque way. It's a scandal that one of the countries most responsible for climate change has simply refused to sign even the very timid Paris Accord.
23 people were killed and dozens injured when a gas tank exploded at a factory in Sudan. The explosion happened at a tile manufacturing factory located in the north of Khartoum. Preliminary investigations by the authorities show the tragedy could have been caused by a lack of adequate safety equipment at the site.
When the fire happened, we were near the factory. We went out for breakfast and we felt a quake. We tried to enter, but we were surprised by the fire. All the workers rushed and fled the scene of the fire.
The Zimbabwean government has approved a medical services amendment bill aimed at ensuring citizens access to basic health care services. The new bill is critical for Zimbabwe. It comes as doctors have been on strike and the majority of citizens have been facing challenges in securing access to health care. For the first time in the country's history, the bill will safeguard and promote the right of every citizen to basic health care services. It will also prioritize people over 70 years old, those with disabilities and veterans of the liberation struggle.
It considered and approved the Medical Services Amendment Bill 2019, which was presented by the Minister of Justice, Legal and Parliamentary Affairs, who is the chairman of the Committee on Legislation. The Minister informed Cabinet that the Medical Services Amendment Bill 2019 is intended to align the Medical Services Act, Chapter 15.18, with the Constitution under the ongoing legislative reform program which is being pursued by the Second Republic.
More than 200 families have been displaced in Kenya after heavy floods hit the country's western region. Families had to seek shelter in nearby villages as most of their houses have been washed away. Most of them are reported to be in need of humanitarian assistance. Almost 60 people have been killed in floods so far in Kenya since the start of the rainy season.
The person buried here is my mother-in-law. When we woke up, we found that the water was almost removing the coffin from the grave. So we took big stones and placed them on top of the grave to protect the coffin and avoid losing the body.
We don't have farms to cultivate, and even our cows were taken away by the flood waters. So we have a big problem.
Ivory Coast political activist Atalia Yam has been expelled from the West African country. Yam was deported back to Switzerland, where she lived before going to Ivory Coast. This comes after her recent criticism of the French presence in Africa and the use of the CFA franc currency. The authorities say they expelled her because she acted in a manner incompatible with the national interest. We're taking one last break, but stay with us. Thank you for joining us again. In New Zealand, Maori community leaders have gathered in Wellington to deliver a petition to the Parliament against armed police patrols across the country. This follows heightened security concerns after a mass shooting in Christchurch that killed 51 people in March. The small group says they have 10,000 signatures, adding that they do not want the armed police patrol, currently being debated, turned into law. New Zealand, like the United Kingdom and Norway, is one of the few countries where police do not carry guns while on general duty. However, handguns, rifles and tasers are kept in their vehicles and can be used with a supervisor's permission.
If they talked to us, they would know we don't want this. They would know we don't need this. And then to tell us that this is based on overseas experiences. Over in Australia, the number of Aboriginal young who have been killed by a police force because they're armed up. Why are we following in those footsteps? And why are they insulting us? They're doing it for our safety.
There is no let-up in the protest against austerity measures in Lebanon. The police fired tear gas at protesters blocking a main bridge in Beirut in the early hours of Wednesday. The main political parties have been in talks to form a new government after the resignation of the Prime Minister Saad Hariri back in October. They say there is progress, but still no agreement. But the demonstrators want the whole political class to step aside. U.S. Senator Kamala Harris has dropped out of the presidential race ahead of next year's elections. She abandoned a campaign that has recently faltered as she struggled to raise money and make a compelling case for her candidacy. Her departure further narrows the field of contenders 2 months before voting for the Democratic nomination begins in Iowa.
All the good ideas have been had. Another income stream for them.
The United States House Intelligence Committee has released an impeachment report asserting that President Donald Trump abused his power by trying to enlist Ukraine to help him in the 2020 presidential race. The report cites 2 instances of improper conduct: obstruction of the House inquiry and withholding aid from Ukraine on the condition of it investigating one of Trump's political rivals. The document makes clear that another panel must decide whether to recommend Trump's impeachment and removal from office. Hundreds of people gathered in London's Trafalgar Square to protest against U.S. President Donald Trump and NATO. Protesters blocked roads as they held placards reading "Dump Trump" and "No to Racism." Protesters also marched to Buckingham Palace, where NATO leaders were gathering for a reception.
It is quite ridiculous because it's promoting the unjustifiable murders of people, and having somebody like Trump come and kind of voice his opinions and views, knowing the type of person he is and the type of things he promotes, and the views he simply has for even women, is a bit concerning, and just not very confident about what he has to say.
Between 10 and 20 French firefighters are camping out all this week in the Republic Square in Paris to demand higher pay for the risks they run. Some yellow vest protesters turn out to support the firefighters. They say they have an increasing workload as the number of emergency calls rises. President Emmanuel Macron has declared a state of economic and social emergency to address the country's social crisis. His proposed measures include annual bonuses for employees and exceptions from increased social security tax for pensioners.
Un petit peu, c'est la problématique des métiers des secours, c'est que habituellement on est là 365 jours par an, et qu'on soit en grève ou pas, de toute façon les sapeurs-pompiers, les infirmières, les policiers, ils feront leur travail de sécurité intérieure et de santé, et en fait on est là tout le temps.
Parce que on a fait des demandes écrites, on a fait des réunions, il y a eu des manifestations, une notamment qui s'est mal finie. Donc on leur a montré que nous on était des gentils, on n'est pas là pour se faire casser, on n'est pas là pour se faire gazer, donc on est ici, donc même le jour, la nuit, même quand il fait froid, même loin de nos familles, on est là et on lâchera pas.
Climate change activists continue protesting in Spain as the COP25 UN Climate Change Summit enters its 3rd day. A group of protesters submerged themselves in a fountain in central Madrid to call for action against global warming. Others wore life jackets to demonstrate the urgent need for addressing climate change. World leaders are meeting for this 2-week conference to discuss solutions for the environmental crisis. And running parallel to the COP25 conference, the Summit of the Peoples continues in Santiago, Chile. Under the slogan, "Save the Earth, Change the System," the People's Summit hopes to address ways to fight climate change, as well as the ongoing social crisis in Chile. Several forums against extractivism and to promote alternative development models are scheduled to take place during the week-long event. And we leave you with an unusual rendition of The People United from Chile. It was part of a concert called Requiem for Chile, in homage to the victims of police violence in these last 2 months. And with that song, we end our news brief. You can find all of our stories, remember, on our website, telesurenglish.net. And be sure to also join us on social media. We're on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Telesur English, I'm Carla Gonzalez. Thank you for watching.